A second chance. I am John, a man who once took life for granted. For years I was busy with work, always thinking there was time for everything later. But life has its own plans. One day, everything changed. I was driving home from work. The sky was grey and rain tapped on my windshield. I was tired but eager to reach home. Suddenly, a car appeared out of nowhere. There was a loud crash, then darkness. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital room. The white walls and machines made me feel small. My body felt heavy and my mind was foggy. A kind nurse stood by my bed. "You were in a coma, sir," she said softly, "for 6 months." 6 months. I couldn't believe it. My heart ached as I thought about all the time I had lost. What had happened to my family, my job, my life? My sister, Emily, soon walked in. Her eyes were red, but she smiled. "You're awake," she whispered. "We missed you." Tears filled my eyes. I'd been given a second chance at life, and I knew I couldn't waste it. But I also knew that I was not the same man who had crashed his car 6 months ago. Recovering from the accident was not easy. My legs were weak, and even sitting up felt like climbing a mountain. The doctors told me I had to learn how to walk again. I couldn't believe it. Walking, something so simple before, was now a challenge. Emily visited me every day. She brought homemade soup and stories about the world outside the hospital. "The garden is blooming again," she said one afternoon. "You should see it when you get better." Her voice was filled with hope, but I wasn't sure I would ever feel normal again. One morning, the physical therapist came in with a smile. "Ready for a walk?" she asked. I wanted to say no, but I nodded. With her help, I stood up. My legs shook like tree branches in the wind. Step by step, I moved forward, gripping the bars tightly. Sweat dripped down my face, but I didn't stop. After what felt like hours, I sat back down, breathing hard. "Good job, John," the therapist said. "Tomorrow will be better." Later that night, I looked at the ceiling, thinking about my life before the accident. I had worked long hours, barely seeing my family. I thought I had all the time in the world, but now I realized time was precious, and I couldn't waste it anymore. I promised myself that once I left the hospital, I would be a different man. After weeks of hard work, I finally left the hospital. Emily was waiting for me at the door, her smile brighter than the sun. "Welcome home, John," she said softly. I leaned on my cane, feeling the cool breeze on my face. Home, something I had taken for granted for too long. The first few days were strange. The house felt both familiar and new. I noticed things I had ignored before: the creaking stairs, the smell of fresh flowers in the living room, and the sound of birds outside the window. Emily had kept everything beautiful while I was gone. One evening we sat together in the garden. The roses were in full bloom, their colours vibrant under the fading sun. Emily held my hand. "Do you remember when we planted these?" she asked. I nodded, memories flooding back. We had planted them during our first year in this house, full of dreams and laughter. "I was too busy before," I admitted. "I miss so much." Emily squeezed my hand gently. "You're here now," she said. That's what matters. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months. The weight on my chest seemed lighter, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Life at home was different now. I walked slower, but I saw more. Each step felt meaningful, as if I was rediscovering the world. Emily helped me with everything, from tying my shoes to cooking meals. Her kindness humbled me. One morning, I sat by the window, watching the neighbourhood wake up. Children laughed as they ran to school. A man across the street watered his garden. Life went on, simple and beautiful. I realized how much I had missed while being caught up in work and routine. Later that day, I decided to take a short walk. Emily offered to come with me, but I wanted to do it alone. The air was crisp, and the road felt familiar yet new. I passed by Mr. Thompson's bakery, where the smell of fresh bread filled the air. "John, good to see you out and about, mister." Thompson greeted warmly. "Good to see you too," I said with a smile. As I walked back home, I felt a strange sense of joy. The simple act of walking, of being part of the world again, was a gift. I promised myself I wouldn't waste another moment. One afternoon I sat with Emily in the garden. The sun was warm, and the flowers swayed gently in the breeze. Birds chirped in the trees, filling the air with music. Emily looked at me with a smile. "You've changed, John," she said softly. "I hope for the better," I replied. "You appreciate things more now," she said, "even the little things." She was right. I noticed the beauty in life that I had ignored before: the laughter of children, the colours of the sunset, and the kindness of neighbours. These were treasures I had once overlooked. We talked about the past and the future. Emily shared her dreams, and I listened carefully. For the first time in years, I truly heard her. I realized how much I had taken her love for granted. As the day ended, I felt a deep gratitude. Life had given me a second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. The days turned into weeks, and I found myself growing stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. One morning, I decided to visit the park where Emily and I had first met. It was still as beautiful as I remembered, with tall trees, green grass, and families enjoying picnics. I sat on a wooden bench, watching children play and couples walk hand in hand. Life was simple and beautiful, and I had finally learned to appreciate it. An elderly man sat next to me. He smiled and said, "Lovely day, isn't it?" "Yes," I replied. "Every day is lovely if we look closely." He nodded thoughtfully. "You sound like a man who has learned something important." I smiled. "I have. I used to take life for granted, but after being in a coma, I see things differently now. I appreciate every moment." The man patted my shoulder. "That's wisdom, my friend. Some never learn that lesson." As I walked back home, I thought about his words. Life is fragile and precious. It's not about having everything but cherishing what we have: family, love, and simple joys. When I reached home, Emily greeted me with a warm hug. "How was your walk?" she asked. "It was wonderful," I said, meaning every word, "and I'm grateful to share this life with you." She smiled. "I'm glad you're here, John. You're a better man now." And she was right. My journey had changed me, but it was only the beginning of a new, meaningful chapter in my life.